Okay, let me pray, and then we will get started. Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for this chance to serve you. I pray that you would speak to our hearts. There are a variety of ways. There's so many needs around the world, and so many ways we can serve you, and that can get so difficult to filter through. So each one of us, you're guiding us as a church, you're guiding each one of us. Help us to hear what you have for us. Someone here might be feeling a call to missions to serve you with their lives, maybe for a month, for a year, for years. I pray you'd speak to us. Give us the courage to take the next step and follow you. Some of us might be challenged to give above and beyond what we have. Pray that you would help us to obey that, to sacrifice, to partner with you. You sacrificed yourself for us. Help us to sacrifice for your people as well. And I pray you'd speak through me today. We want to hear from your word. We want to be more like you. We want to know what you have for us. And as we talk about some things that are hard to talk about, help us to be open to what you have for us. So we give you this time in your holy name. Amen. Well, as we've been talking, we're going through Matthew, and we are in chapter, where are we, 16? Where are we at? What chapter are we in? 16. Online it says 17. So if you're watching online, I apologize. Turn back one chapter. When I have to post what I'm preaching on for the Facebook, it is the most stressful point of my week. It's like 2 sentences, and it's rough. Anyway, we're in chapter 16. We're going through Matthew very slowly, and as we've been talking about, there's been a bit of a tone change. Jesus is beginning to say some hard things as he's kind of ramping things up towards his execution, right? Things are starting to get real. And last week we talked about the scene in Caesarea Philippi, one of my favorite stories where Jesus asks, "Who do you say that I am?" And he doesn't just ask that of Peter. That's the story. He asks that of all of us, right? Who do you say that I am? At some point in our lives, we are going to have to answer that question for real. And the thing is, the answer to that question has consequences, because Jesus doesn't just call us to believe something or say the right things or say I believe the right things. He calls us to a life, right? Those beliefs, that answer has consequences. And I know as we get into Paul and we get into the Reformation and modern Christianity, we often talk about it's just like a belief statement. And there are those statements in Scripture. But if we look back to Jesus, and Paul is always referring to Jesus, Paul is assuming that your lives will be different because of what you believe. And so Jesus is calling us out. And we have to recognize that is the same Jesus that says all these nice things, right? Some of the things Jesus says are a lot easier to take. And as we get into this, there's going to be some things that are hard to hear and hard to say and hard to know what to do with. Let me read this first passage from 16:21 through 23. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Whenever I've said this often, I often picture these scenes. So these scenes happen with real people in a real place at a real time. Like, this is history, right? So this really happened. We have every reason to believe that this moment or something very similar to this really happened. And it sounds like, even though when you read the word disciples, we often think of the 12, it sometimes can mean many more people that were following Jesus. It feels like it was probably just the 12 sitting there, and I picture this conversation, and then all the other disciples and it's just quiet. Everyone's looking around, and eventually the nervous those weird itches, right? You're like, what do I do with my hands? There's no pockets in these robes. What do we do? I picture that moment. How quiet was that? I think you stepped in it, Peter. That's pretty strong. Clearly, the disciples, there's been clues to this all along, but clearly the disciples have not been picking up what Jesus is laying down. This is not what they could have imagined, hoped for, or understood. This is not what they thought would happen. I mean, Jesus is not what they thought would happen. Nothing about Jesus made sense to them, but as they spend time with him and travel with him and hear him speak and see him live and see what he does and see who he speaks to and see who he helps, their minds are beginning to open up and understand, oh, Jesus is the one. That's the conversation that Matthew just relayed. You are the chosen one. You are the Savior. You're the one. You're the answer to the questions of life, the universe, and everything. You are him. The book of Isaiah anticipates the suffering servant. They knew that somewhere along the line, someone who would be a very big deal would also suffer. And I don't know that Isaiah understood that that was going to be Jesus sometime later. I think he was thinking it would be someone in his own lifetime or soon. But then as they looked back through the lens of Jesus, they understood that's Jesus who Isaiah was talking about. But they anticipated someone would suffer. But surely it can't be you, Jesus. You're the only perfect thing we've ever seen. Why would you suffer? That doesn't make sense. I've said before, no one would draw up Jesus. If you're trying to draw up a religion to just trick people or make some money or something, you wouldn't come up with Jesus. That's just, it's like bad idea after bad idea. Why would you do that? He doesn't make sense. Continues them to not make sense. So why does Peter speak this way to Jesus, the man whom he loves and just proclaimed, you are the one? I think his rebuke comes from a place of love. I think Peter really loves Jesus. And thank God for Peter, right? The guy is always putting his foot in his mouth, going for it. I think he loves Jesus. And what he means is that he himself would rather die than see Jesus harmed in any way. I'd take the bullet for you any day, Jesus. Can't be you. This can't happen. Not you. He knew the Romans and the Jewish leaders he knew what they were capable of. Humans are good at devising creative and painful and humiliating ways to execute rebels and heretics and rabble-rousers. We have a long history of barbaric behavior, right? You've committed whatever crime, and so we can do whatever we want to. We do it now. We do it in different ways now. This is not an old thing. This is a thing. Humans really like to treat other humans really poorly. On some level, we do it when we love the death of a career, right? When someone gets caught in adultery or embezzling money, we just love that. We revel in that, right? How can we tear them down and wreck them in some way? Someone's been unfaithful. There's been some indiscretion. This seems to validate our own superiority. I'm not as bad as that guy. Or see, we're all corrupt, so integrity doesn't really matter. We kind of revel in that. Well, Peter knew that if Jesus was to face the Romans and the Jewish leaders, it was going to be awful. And Peter wants to protect him from that. He also, I think, wants things to continue as they are. I mean, why not? Things are going pretty good for Peter. He's gone from being a lowly fisherman to the leader of this band of disciples. He's second in command. Jesus has put Peter in charge. Again, a decision none of us would make, and yet Jesus made it, and he continues to make that. Put people in charge that seemed ill-equipped for the responsibility. Peter's been given purpose. Peter's been forgiven and loved. Who wouldn't want that to end? And surely the death of Jesus means all this goes away, right? Of course Peter speaks out against that. But what about the bit about rising on the third day? I mean, Jesus has kind of been alluding to this kind of thing. What are you talking about? You think he was, think he'd say something like, well, that's not so bad. Sure, you're going to die, but you're going to raise again. I think in that moment, that was impossible to understand and believe. Peter just couldn't get his head around that. Who does that? And yeah, the scene with Lazarus had happened. He'd died and been resurrected, but hey, we're talking about God here. First, you're trying to get your head around God came to earth, so God who made humans and earth and all this stuff now is living a human life and living in all this filth and all that, and that's what? And now you're going to die? If God's eternal, how can he die? It's a big question that Muslims have. Like, this is heresy, right? Like, of course we don't believe in Jesus. Jesus can't be God. He can only be a prophet or a good man because God can't die. There's a logic to that. And Jesus is defying that logic. Peter's trying to get his head around that. How can that happen? You're saying you're going to die and then be undead? I think Peter is speaking from a place of love and fear and incredulity. So why does Jesus respond so sharply? I mean, isn't this just a simple misunderstanding? Let me just clear this up for you. You forgot to carry the one, and now it all works out. Jesus responds pretty sharply. There's not many moments that compare with saying something like, "Get behind me, Satan." Right? I mean, I can count on one hand the number of times I've said that this week. Right? It's just not something if you are in the habit of saying that, I want you to stop it. Like, don't say that, right? That is not a good way to solve a disagreement with a friend or a spouse or at work. Don't do that. If you're in a budget meeting at work, don't say, "Get behind me, Satan," when someone doesn't like your ideas. That's probably not going to work. Peter's wish, Peter's hope, and I do think out of love, Peter's desire is unfortunately the opposite of God's plan. And Jesus knows, and Peter will later come to understand, that only the enemy would benefit. And the result would be destruction rather than redemption, reconciliation, and restoration. It is only through Jesus' death that all things can be made new and right and good. And isn't it newness, freshness, hope that we crave? Something better? Somehow we have this sense that something is better out there, somewhere, somehow. Jesus is saying to get what you want, Peter, is to get the opposite of what you want and what you need. You don't understand that. What you are saying is what the enemy wants. Let's move on in our passage, Matthew 16:24 through 27. This is the rest of the conversation. Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." So remember, this series of ideas and thoughts and conversations. Who do you say I am? You're the Messiah. You're the Son of God. The Son of God is going to have to die. That's going to happen. And then he continues, "If you would come after me, if you would follow me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done." This is a tough passage. Is Jesus saying I have to die? Yes and no. Jesus spoke often of the kingdom of God, and this has at least two meanings. It is the kingdom that we can live now, and is the kingdom that we hope for when it's perfect. It will not be perfect in this life. But the more kingdom life and values we have here, the more peace, the more joy, the less hell we have here on earth. Jesus is linking them. We live the kingdom now so we can enjoy the fully prepared and realized kingdom then for eternity. It's a now and then. We live it now so we can enjoy it then. Later on, some decades later, Paul will say that we are not citizens of this world, that our home is in heaven. So that means that I have more in common with fellow believers from Russia or Korea or South Africa than I do with non-believers from La Crosse or Michigan where I grew up. There's something that binds us that is deeper and more real, because our home, our values are from somewhere else. Some of you may know this. I worked in higher education for a long time. I worked in student development. I was a hall director. And 1 year I spent in Utah at the University of Utah. Big public school. It was a great year. I had a lot of fun. And I was speaking once with the director of international student stuff, I think was her title. International student stuff is what they call it. So she worked with international students. They had a lot of kind of Pacific Island students and stuff. And so I remember her saying something about the Australian students. There was a small group of Australian students, and how they bonded together. They were just a tight-knit group. There was just a handful of them, and they were super Australian. Like, they really lived it up. And this is back, like, Crocodile Dundee was pretty fresh, so. But I remember one thing she said, like, they hang out together, they indulge in their thick, great Australian accents, and they only drink Foster's beer. They're like super Australian. Anything Australian is what they're going to do, because they're trying to maintain their identity as Australians, right? They're in the U.S. They're doing all the things you do to go to school in Utah, get your degree, do your sports or whatever, prepare for careers, wherever they were going to go. But they want to remember and hold on to what makes them Australian. And so even though they were in a very different, maybe different from different parts of Australia, now they're a different part of the world, my citizenship is in heaven. And the more I grow in that, the more that affects how I look at the world, the decisions I make. What would heaven want here? How would heaven want me to respond here? How would heaven want me to treat this person here and now? And most of the time, that's going to be peacefully, lovingly, kindly, joyfully, hopefully, self-sacrificially. Does that mean we don't judge things? Of course, we have to make judgment calls. But my citizenship, my way of living is supposed to be heavenly, not Wisconsinly. Right? It's not simply what we say or what we believe or what we say we believe. We're held accountable for our lives. Do you live like a citizen of heaven now or not? Most of us would say, depends, right? Depends on the topic, depends on the moment. Perhaps on the drive here, you did not, right? Or when you're pulling out of the street to head home, maybe not so much. Other times, maybe more so. We're all on a trajectory, right? We're hopefully moving closer to heaven day by day. We're called to deny ourselves what the world offers, what the rules of this life offer, in exchange for an eternity with Jesus in heaven. A place where there is no pain. A place where there is great hope and love. But do I have to die, is the question. Jake, you've been skirting that a little bit. Worldwide, Christians are persecuted and sometimes martyred. One thing that is hard for us to grasp is, speaking throughout history, Christendom, and the Christendom that we read about in the New Testament, is one that existed in persecution. That is the normative state for Christians throughout history. So when we speak of Christianity or Christians being persecuted in this country, you are wrong. That is not what the first century Christians would have understood to be persecution. You are not being used as a lantern while alive to light up Nero's house. That's something that first and second Christians had to deal with. Sometimes people were set on fire alive because they were Christians. That was fun. Sometimes they were just fed to lions. Let's watch this. Sometimes they were just lucky enough to be jailed. That's not happening in this country. The normative state throughout history is persecution. And to be honest, the church tends to thrive better in those circumstances. Are we called to that? Do we have to do that to be obedient to Jesus? No. So what does it mean? Because most of the disciples were martyred. Some we have a pretty clear idea, some it's more a legend, but there's good reason to believe that most of them were martyred. And there were some of the earliest Christians were. but many were not. And they were faithful Christians. So what does this mean for those of us who don't die for our faith? I think it means living his way, which means not living my way. The men's Bible study, we've been going through Philemon and having some great conversations. And this last week we talked about, if Philemon is this great book, I used to not like the book of Philemon at all. It just irked me. This really bothers me. And the more I understand it, the more I get into it, the more I appreciate it. It's this tiny little letter. Encourage you, go home and read it, and then read it again tomorrow. Just read it, reread it. We talked about forgiveness and reconciliation, which is much of what the book is about. Jesus teaches us to practice reconciliation with people we have wronged and to forgive as we've been forgiven, because he's forgiven us. We ask the question, why forgive someone who hasn't apologized to you, or someone who doesn't really care if you forgive them or not? Why do that? To quote Josh Barong, who was there, he said, because it removes the rot. When I give up that and I allow myself to forgive someone that has wronged me, I'm freed. That other person may not know or care or be changed by that, but I can be. There's a part of me that thinks that's stupid. I like being bitter. I like holding a grudge. It's like the wet wool blanket that just comforts me, right? There we go. Let's be sad, right? And just stiff arm the world. That I understand. It makes sense to me. But it's not the kingdom way. Jesus died for me. I didn't ask him to. He died for me because I was worth dying for, and so are you. That should be the lens through which I view everything and everyone. One of the criticisms of Christianity is that it's like trying to churn out these automatons, right? We're all the same. Give up yourself so you can live this way. And there are certainly throughout history, there are groups of people trying to be faithful that all dress alike and whatever, and that's another conversation. I don't think that is what Jesus is getting at. Die unto yourself. Give up your personality and your identity, all that makes you you, and follow me. I mentioned last week. Today we, I think, sang a song again about creation. What's it called? God of Wonders. I love that song. When I look at creation, I see so much variety that is so unnecessary. We don't need that many kinds of dogs. I apologize. We don't need that many colors of green. We don't need all that. I think God likes the variety. Skin color, culture, you name it. He likes variety. He's made us unique and different. But he wants us to be the best version of us, of ourselves. The one that doesn't hold grudges. Boy, what would that be like? The one that isn't jealous. Doesn't look at other people's blessings with jealousy. I can't. I'm talking about myself. Sometimes I have a hard time enjoying what other people get to enjoy because I'm jealous of that. That's just icky. Oh, boy. If Jesus could remove that from me, I think I would be a better me, and I would enjoy his kingdom that much more and enjoy his people that much more. The law gave us all kinds of rules to follow, but then Jesus says, no, I want your heart. So yes, it is good to not commit adultery. Don't do that. But also don't look at people as sexual objects. They're not just there for your enjoyment. That's my daughter. That's my son. Treat them well. Love them. Well, that's a different issue, right? You want my heart? But boy, as Jesus removes the lust from our hearts, we're able to have pure and whole relationships with each other, unencumbered by all that ick. He wants a better me. He wants a better you. He doesn't tell us to stop making judgment calls, but before that, remove that huge thing in your eye that you're looking at someone else's mistakes through the wrong lens. Clean it up, and you may find out that the thing they're dealing with isn't so big after all. At the very least, you can help them more wholly, more perfectly, more kindly. This country loves a proud, self-made person, even if they've hurt people along the way. But Jesus is close to those who mourn, those who grieve, those who don't have anyone in their corner. That's who Jesus came for. That's who Jesus advocated for. That's who Jesus hung out with. Boy, if you could remove some pride from my heart, I might be a better me, right? You might be a better you. He isn't calling me to give up myself to be some kind of carbon copy of everyone else. He's calling me and providing opportunity for me to be the best version of myself, to die to myself. Let him work and speak through me. The earliest Christians referred to following Jesus, the Christian life, as the way. Right? This is the way to live. This is the way we think, the way we worship, the way we see ourselves, the way we see our neighbors. To live the way, you have to die to other ways of living, right? And that sometimes really hurts, kind of like a death. Gosh, I really like gossip, or I really like just feeling arrogant, or I really like just kind of hoarding my resources, being greedy. I really like that. I need to die to those parts of me. The good news is those were really death anyway. There's no joy in living that way. There's no hope. There's no peace. There's certainly no love. As we look ahead to Advent, I've been reading about Advent, so you're probably going to start hearing about Advent way early in the season, so I'm very excited about it. As we look ahead to Advent, we hope for the newness and the renewness, the recommitment, the reestablishment, the recovenanting that Christmas brings. Living Jesus' way now so we can live his way forever. Jesus calls us to die, not so that we give up everything that we are, but so we can be more like him, be more free to be the person he sees in us. Many of us had that person in our lives, a pastor, a teacher, a parent, someone that said, I see in you, I see this, right? And they call something out in you that was dormant, right? Something that a door opens that wouldn't have been open if they hadn't said, I think you could be a teacher. Many of you know I've coached a lot, and so I've said that to a few people, and I love coaching. I respect that role. It's a very important role in a kid's life. Sports can save. I'm not going to stop. So I occasionally say, I think you could be a coach. I think you could do this. We've had those people. We've had people on the worship team that were very shy, and then all of a sudden they're leading a song. I think you could lead this song. Well, no, I couldn't do that, and now they are. Things get called out in us. We get to be more fully who we're meant to be. Michelle is going to come up, and she's going to lead us in communion. This is a time, I don't want to steal her thunder, but this is a time to think about what Jesus did for us and to recovenant with him and let him to continue to work in and through our lives.